almost daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zappa. Let's talk Trump.
Namaste, my friends. Hello. Welcome to my show. Thank you for tuning in. Talk about a roller coaster ride this weekend, yeah? There is so much to talk about. From the Tower of Babylon to the Squad of Four and everything in between. And as per usual, I'm gonna ramble my way through it all. Let me kick it off with this reference to the Tower of Babel. Just last week, I think maybe Thursday? I'm not sure. Let me see if my thingy... Well, it's July... Oh no, see, I edited it today, so the date changed. Oh, Apple. But somewhere last week, I think, or rather, right after the last episode I recorded, not necessarily the last episode I uploaded, I saw an article on my handy-dandy Apple News app, and it really caught my eye and made me go, what the fuck? But the ancient Iraqi city of Babylon has been, has been honored by the UNESCO World Heritage Society as an official World Heritage Site. There's a lot we can get into about the potential significance of that. But for that to make sense, we'd really have to get into the original meaning of that. And as we all know, biblical things are, thrown out, right out the window by most non-religious people. Because, what's a book written by some shepherds in near Stone Age times got to do with anything? Now that's pretty reductive thinking, my friends. But we'll come back to that. And in fact, to put a pin in it, I want to do a whole Tower of Babel episode. But let me just say this. Based on my personal sort of, wacky, very unorganized research over the years, my own personal investigations, there's some deep significance to the Tower of Babel legend, to the story of the Tower of Babel being toppled. And as with a lot of passages in the Bible, I'd like to propose that it's been misconstrued and that it's been manipulated, and that there's still scraps of evidence that help us decipher its original meaning. But as with a lot of the Bible, it basically just doesn't make any sense anymore if you look at it from a surface point of view, especially if you're reading some really watered-down version of the Bible, some really watered-down American version of the Bible. You're not really going to grasp it. But let's contemplate this. Before the Tower of Babel was toppled, it is generally said by the mythologies that all of humanity was united as one. That we all spoke one language, and that we all understood each other, and that we lived in harmony and peace. And that now here's where it gets interesting, right? And I'm, easy breezy doing this recap. I did not look up mythologies of the Tower of Babel just now. I just literally am looking at the headline. It was updated Friday, July 5th. Okay, so it's from just around then. I probably saw it, I probably saw it right around the 4th of July. And I think I saw it around the 4th of July and wanted to comment on it in the 4th of July episode, but totally didn't, because I didn't come up with a good segue. But I was saying, some of the key ingredients to the Tower of Babel mythology or story or symbolism is that we built it because we were unified. The city of Babylon was the gem in the center of all known civilization. It was the capital of the known world. It was the cradle, the oldest of cities, right? The original origin of some organized system of societal city living. And this tower was our greatest achievement as a unified and peaceful society. And what does God do? He gets mad at our hubris for trying to reach the sky. Now, let's put a pin in that, because my God is an angry God is a really fascinating fucking thing to believe about your God. And I reject that. My God is a vengeful God. My God is a wrathful God. That sounds like some really hardcore brainwashing, in my opinion. But, we can get into a big ontological debate about where we get the origins of stuff. And as I said before, as a challenge to all Bible thumpers, if you haven't read it in its original Aramaic, cuneiform, or what's that other language? If you haven't even read it in Latin, you're missing out on a lot of data. Okay? There's just tons of information that were stripped away. Information that was stripped away by the reductionary adaptation of word choice. Because English is a pretty... No offense, my fellow Americans. I'm not pissing on America here. Remember, Americans didn't invent English. Let's remember that. But all languages have gone through some form of reductive evolution. Their meanings get flattened down. You can see this just comparing the evolutionary cycles of English. There's a great meme that's been floating around, I don't know how long, but it comes to mind now, and I only just recently saw it, that reads, Shakespeare wasn't pretentious. Shakespeare fans are pretentious. And then there's a really beautiful, funny breakdown of what Shakespeare actually is. And then it ends with, don't get caught up in the language. Now, I don't have the meme in front of me, so I'm not trying to, I'm not going to try to give you the whole thing. It's one of those, it's a big block of text. It's a big, blocky paragraph, and it's full of funny stuff. But that's not my point. My point is, don't get caught up in the language. And comparing ye olde time Shakespearean English with contemporary American or contemporary British English, one can clearly understand what I mean by the reductive flattening out or dumbing down of language. There's just this rich, massive, dense collection of words that aren't cool anymore. And the words we do use nowadays increasingly tend to have flatter and less useful, less meaningful meanings. Now imagine the magnitude of that difference and compare it to how much more different contemporary American English might be to full-blown hardcore Latin. And then consider that Latin was the language of the oppressors. Okay? Latin was the language wielded by those who controlled the Catholic Church when it ascended from hijacking, when it achieved its hijacking of the spiritual practice that was the early Christian movement. The early, forgive me, because they weren't Christians. They were entheogenic mystics that practiced whatever you would call the teachings of Yeshua and Magdalene. Okay? Throw that around with your Christian friends, by the way. And hey, let me pause here for a second. My show probably alienates a lot of people, but I'm hoping that it also engages everyone on all sides enough to lure you in to think past your own echo chambers, your own ideological comfort zone. Because I'm not against anyone, right? I'm not out to slam Christians. I am out to shake them awake and help them realize that they've been boondoggled. They've been sold a bill of goods. They've been lied to about their beloved blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white-skinned Jesus. That Jesus does not exist. Never did. And even when Jesus was a little tanner, back in the height of the growth of the Christian Catholic transition, from being followers of Yeshua to becoming the Catholic Church, Yeshua was represented a lot browner back then because, more of those people were still from the general Middle East region. How blonde-haired and blue-eyed was Cathol? You know who Cathol was, right? But thanks, Eddie Izzard. How blonde-haired and blue-eyed were the leaders of Constantinople. Okay. So my point is with bringing up this Babylon story is that it's fascinating that right now world organizations are investing once again in digging up, literally, and proverbially, and symbolically, let's say, digging up the Tower of Babel, the city of Babylon. If I'm an idiot and I'm confusing those are two different cities, I'll forgive anybody who comes at me with anger to correct me. But to the best of my, let's do a Mr. Zeppo's an idiot check right now. Tower of Babel. Tower of London. It's funny. First thing that Google recommends. Tower of Babel. Here we go. Tower of Babel myth summary. It's the third thing down the list. LearnReligions.com is the very first thing on the thing. Britannica.com, and then Wikipedia. I like Wikipedia, although it's funny because, the whole argument against the evil, controlled, fake media empires is that they're evil and controlled and that they're all edited and lied about. With Wikipedia, anybody can literally you don't have to hack it. You just create the right kind of account, log in, and you can propose changes. So there's constantly this concern of how much undue influence has crept into the article I'm reading here on Wikipedia. And I guess the only sort of silver lining is that in theory, plenty of eyeballs are on any given article and are going to go, whoa, what the fuck is that? That's not true. Come back in there and edit it back. But then we get into this whole debate of where do we find the truth? But let's not go down that rabbit hole right now. The Tower of Babel, in Hebrew, the Midgad Babel, is a narrative in Genesis 11:119, and it is an origin myth meant to explain the world's peoples and why we speak different languages. So it basically is one of the stories that tells us why we separated. We were once united, we were once one people, and then we got split apart. But we're looking for the thing. Here's a section. I scroll down a bit in the etymology section. Wikipedia points out that the phrase, quote, Tower of Babel, end quote, does not appear in the Bible. It is always the city and the tower, or just the city. The original derivation of the name Babel, also the Hebrew name for Babylon, is uncertain. The narrative Akkadian name of the city was Babilim, Babilim, meaning the gate of God. Now here's what I always like to come back to: the root origins of words. Because people talk about the Tower of Babel all the time. right? And you can throw it around like you know what you're talking about. And most, again, not trying to offend Christians, I love you, my brothers and sisters. I'm just deeply concerned that you've been misled by false idols and false representations of Yeshua and Magdalene. I mean, the proof of it is that y'all don't know who Yeshua and Magdalene are. But I digress. The gate of God. According to the Bible, the city received the name Babel from the Hebrew verb balal, meaning to jumble or confuse. And that's where we get like babble, like the literal our contemporary sense of like you're babbling. But there's some rich relationships there, right? Babbling, speaking confusedly or jumbled. There's also like to speak in tongues, which is also babbling. And then we've got this concept of the gate of God. And this tower, the tower was an attempt to culminate our connection to the divine, to physicalize, to build a representation of our connection to the divine. Oh, fascinating sidebar. According to comparable myths section of this article, there are various traditional similar stories found in Central America. The Great Pyramid of Cholula, etc. And then there's references to the Toltecs, there's references to some Dominican friars during the rape and pillaging of Latin America by the Catholic Church, etc., etc., etc. Apparently in Arizona, the Tohono O'odham people holds that Montezuma escaped a great flood and then became wicked and attempted to build a house, eyeballs are playing tricks on me, a house reaching to heaven. In Nepal, similar stories. In Africa, other stories. So, okay, here they have a 9-step breakdown of the biblical narrative, right? It's the very top of the article. 1. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. 2. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. 3. And they said to one another, Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. 4. And they said, Go, let us build a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. That's interesting. So the people of earth were unified in one speech. They were one people, but they didn't have a name. 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. 6. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. That's a brilliant passage. There's a lot to analyze and unpack there. We're not going to get sidetracked, though. We're going to put a pin in that. 7, go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Okay. Yet again, an instance where God speaks in the plural. Let us go down. This isn't the royal we, which is ridiculous when American presidents or American politicians use. That's one of those things that Americans are just like, whatever, we get it. I'm like, no. They're using the royal we. Do you understand what that means, yo? Like, think about it. Dig it up. What does royalty and the power to say we mean? Especially in relationship to the notion that royalty is hand-selected by God, and that God constantly speaks in the plural to other entities that we aren't allowed to question or think about or investigate. Getting back to this breakdown, so in step 7, let us go down there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. 8, so the Lord scattered them abroad, and from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. 9, therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Genesis 11, 1 through 9. Again, these are American English watered-down derivatives of what sound like, to me, derivatives of King James. Okay? These sentences that they paraphrased here for us on this handy-dandy breakdown. What can we extrapolate from this breakdown, though? That's outside of the dogmatic box of what the Catholic Christian derivatives teach us. We were once all one people, and for some reason that doesn't make sense, God, the divine being that created us as one complete, united people, decided to fuck us over. Because, and here's the linchpin, because now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Now this is really clear to me. One of the many indications throughout the post-Catholicification of the Bible, of the texts that were originally not called the Bible, and then compiled, edited, and befouled with corruption, and then called the Bible, that indicates, and I don't know why. I don't know why the various groups, because it was multiple generations of this event happening, the hijacking of a spiritual movement and the transformation of it from a tradition of carrying forward wisdom into a systematic mind fuck with dogmatic ideological brainwashing. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that everything that came before Catholicism was pure and innocent and much more valid. No. The same sorts of nonsense had rippled through, faith systems and belief systems and other religions in the past. It's an ancient game we're playing, folks. That's why I keep saying, this shit is older than the Tower of Babel. But here we are. The Tower of Babel is one of those places where, if we step out of the confines of religious dogma, we can find massive evidence for the theory that we were once a severely advanced civilization with high-level technology and a strong sense of unity, and perhaps, we were on the verge of achieving some form of transformative, evolutionary next step. And then, when we achieved that transformative next step, nothing would be restrained from us that we can imagine creating. Now, why would God want to prevent us from that level of growth? Why would God want to stop us from achieving that achievement? Makes no motherfucking sense, does it? Now, the only way that makes sense is if that destruction was in fact conducted by the human element that was too addicted to power, was too caught up in greed, and was too far down the slippery slope of the ego trap of this merry-go-round meat grinder of life and death. and did not want to let those things go, and therefore sabotaged our own advancement. So the theory there is that humanity has achieved this almost transitional, life-changing achievement multiple times, and then we fuck ourselves over. Why? Because greed is greed and more is never enough, and we want to stay here in this baseline place, in this low level of understanding place, and avoid enlightenment. Because after enlightenment, you can no longer enjoy the thrills and rewards of pursuing power, of pursuing profit, of pursuing greed. Okay, let's step back. The fuck does this have to do with what's going on today in Trumptopia? Well, friends, a shit ton. A shit ton. And that's why I call out this really interesting incident that, suddenly, after decades of neglect, as the article points out, suddenly Babylon, and quite possibly whatever remnants and information and data left over from the building of the Tower of Babel and whatever was going on before the building of the Tower of Babel, is being dug up out of the earth. As the article about this UNESCO choice points out, quote, it would allow for further exploration and research. And a local tour guide by the name of Maki Mohammed Faroud, who's worked there for 25 years, says that not even 18% of it has been excavated. All right? Is there significance between all that and what's going on in Trumptopia today? I argue there is. But in my effort to keep episodes shorter and shorter and more tightly organized, I'm going to take a pause here, friends, because I think this is a good length. We just went in depth into this weirdness of the Tower of Babel. Now we're going to move forward and talk about what's going on today in part 2. So stick with me. My story gets better. Come back after a couple seconds. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to fill up my cup of coffee, and we'll get right to it and be tackling today's most urgent political clusterfuck of bullshit distractionary measures and discuss what might possibly be going on behind those things.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.